Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen and show you the brief PowerPoint that I have. So I'm going to slideshow and play from start. So here's the basic function of the night, and here's how I'm going to try to organize and present it. I'm going to start with an introduction to the insight session that we have. I've started that to a certain part already. And then I'm going to show a few pieces of oral history in which we'll talk a little bit about the diversity of the district. And then I want to come back and talk a little bit directly about oral history, what it is, and then give you a few more snippets of oral history. And then I'm going to talk about how oral history is conducted. And then I'm going to show you some more. And the second half of the evening, I'm going to start with a quick talk about the PSWD oral history collection, then show you some art and music from the PSWD churches from the oral histories. Then I will talk a little bit about the finding aid and then back to show you some more. And so as you can see, there's going to be an alternation here between me talking and you watching. One of the things I'm concerned about, and because I was not able to test this out because of the technical problems that I had over the last couple of days, I'm concerned that in showing those oral histories that in some of you it might slow and stop and come back in because of the internet connections. It's really hard to tell. So please bear with it if it works out that way and let me know. I mean, if it turns out that it's a disaster for everyone, I'll try to do it in a different way. So what I'm planning to do in this introduction to the insight session is to, as I indicated, you talk a little bit about oral history and show you a little bit some of the excerpts of the oral history that I have collected. I'm going to talk a little bit later on in the hour about the whole collection, but I will tell you I have something like 50 hours of taping that I have collected for this, and we're going to see about a half hour's worth. So you know that it's a very short amount. I'm also want to say at this point, and I'll emphasize it later on when I actually talk about what oral history is that oral history is not designed to be something to be shown. So the technical quality is not particularly high, particularly when you compare it to what we're used to, when they have film crews and microphone holders and all the lights are perfect and everybody has their blush on and so forth. They look perfect. This is real people talking about real things. And so some of it will seem rather crude, not crude in the sense of what they're saying, but in terms of the lighting and so forth. So having said that, I would like to share the first snippet and we'll see how that works. It's a fairly short one. So if there are problems when I come back to talk again from that effort, we can discuss ways potentially of alleviating that problem. So here's going to be the first of the snippets. So let's see how it works.
The Pacific Southwest District office is housed at the Glendora Church of the Brethren, here shown in a photo by District Administrative Assistant Joe Vecchio. District Executive Russ Madison here discusses the diversity of the district.
We have a great theological diversity within the Pacific Southwest District, from theological differences from very conservative to very progressive, and also political differences. And they may run fairly similar to their theological status as well.
Andrew Sampson, pastor of the Modesto Church of the Brethren, is intrigued by the district's diversity.
Perhaps the most interesting aspect of the district is there are differences, sometimes quite significant differences, and yet there's kind of a mutual understanding. And I mean, I know there's the unity statement. I know that's probably the biggest reason for it, but I don't think I've ever been a part of a district that's had such diversity and actually been able to get along.
Gilbert Romero, former pastor of the Bella Vista Church of the Brethren and currently ministry training coordinator, describes how he became one of the first Spanish language pastors in the district.
Was out there working, and one day the Lord called me and says, I want you to come into the ministry. And I said, you must have bumped your head, God, because pastors are poor. I don't want to be poor, and I'm making a lot of money right now, and I don't want to give up my route, my business. I had 125 clients, and I had men working, and all of a sudden the Lord says, I want you to be the pastor of Bella Vista. One day I went to the grandpa, which is Ralph Robinson, and I told him, Grandpa, I think I'm supposed to be the pastor of Bella Vista. And he tells me, what took you so long? And so I got licensed into the ministry. I didn't know how to read and write.
Like Gilbert Romero, many pastors in the PSWD hold other jobs in order to support themselves and their family.
We've probably got 26 churches. We've probably got 6 or 7 that are, compensating pastors at a full-time scale position, and everybody else is working some other kind of variation off of that.
Vocational. Well, it's a term that means that I work so that I can be a pastor. Being a pastor of a Hispanic church, even if you have 175 or 200 gathering, there's a lot of underserved families attending our congregation in the community that surround us in Santa Ana. So, and always it's been like that. Every Hispanic congregation that we have served with is basically, income, it's the lowest. They're blue collar and workers. So the little money that we have, we try to spend it into ministries that are happening at church versus my salary. So I always found a full-time job and doing something else, and then spend the evenings and weekends with my leaders. So in a way, I am a part-time minister doing a full-time job.
Robert Aguirre, pastor of the Glendale Church of the Brethren, sees his bivocational status in a positive light.
I work at Target. I think it's something about it is so healthy. I think for a pastor of a small church to go get a little more income, but also just to work with other people. I've never liked this idea that a church hires one person and says, we're going to get you to 60 grand and you're going to do everything. That doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. I like the approach kind of a bigger church to sort of say, hey, I'm really good at this, but you give me 20 grand instead of 60 and we'll get 2 other people that are good at something else.
Pastor Thomas Dowdy of the Imperial Heights Church illuminates another critical diversity in the PSWD.
That I learned from what the Church of the Brethren has, but also I bring to the table what I have. Because there are limited African Americans, I come to the table in a focus with the history of my people to share with the broader church that not only this is who I am, but this is what I bring so that you can understand who I am and what I'm about.
Ernest Snyder, the former pastor of the former Tucson Church of the Brethren, added another kind of diversity to the Pacific Southwest District.
I spent 34 years in the military. So I started in the National Guard, and then I went active duty with the military, and I finished out 34 years. And I retired as a brigadier general. When I joined the Church of the Brethren at Rocky Ridge, I was very conscientious about the peace witness of the Church of the Brethren. I avoided mixing the two things together.
Okay. I'm hoping that you were able to see that. Is that a true statement? Were you able to see and hear? Oh, good. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to learn that. Well, as I said, the next topic that I wanted to talk about is what is oral history. Well, you've just seen some examples of oral history. Oral history is when historians go out with some kind of recording device. We can do it now, both orally and visually. When I first started 50 years ago, it was only with a tape recorder. But now we can do it both. And what is the great thing about oral history is that everybody can participate. I hear, and you probably have said it yourself, that history is written by the victors, that history is written by the historians like myself, or history is written only about the big leaders and the important people, or the biggest villains, and so forth. But what oral history allows us to do is collect the histories of everyone. It's possible to talk about the whole of history, and particularly think of yourself about if someone was going to write the history of the Brethren, or the history of the Pacific Southwest District, or the history of your church, what would they do? Well, they may have bulletins. They certainly would have minutes of some of the various meetings or the votes here on this motion or that motion. And think to yourself, what kind of history would that produce? History is based on written documents. And what oral history does is allows everyone to participate in providing those written documents, so that we can hear about all kinds of things. We can hear about a general who becomes a pastor. We can hear about a drug addict who becomes a pastor. We can hear about an alcoholic who keeps one of the current churches together, reformed alcoholic. We can hear about all those kinds of things. Now, I've obviously picked up some rather unusual kinds of things to focus on or to mention, but we all know that things have happened. We all know, in fact, one of the things that I captured in the oral history is that virtually every church, and certainly the denomination, have split on many occasions. Well, what kinds of information do we have about those splits? Well, frequently it's the kind of spin things to make everyone feel good, and when you finish reading it, you say, well, why the heck did they split? My only point here is that oral history provides information from everyone. It provides information from the people who are the support staff, the people who are the leaders, the people who are the participants. And so that's what oral history is all about. And as I say, when I'm particularly in this part of the session, if there's questions or complaints or issues, feel free to bring them up. If not, I'm just going to continue, and there will be also time at the end, hopefully, to discuss. So here we're going to go to the second of the one of the things here, and this one is about some of the history of individual churches.
We sometimes forget, the churches that we read the letters to in the New Testament, none of them are here anymore.
Right.
They had their moment and it passed. I mean, they died, and new life took forth from that. And I really do think that a part of the work is to say, if we believe the gospel, that unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it can't multiply. It can't be born again. I think sometimes we can be really attached and to want to hold on to things, and maybe letting go and letting something new come is the more faithful thing to do. Fresno congregation closed in 2010 or 2011. Fresno had been a huge congregation, a strong conservative congregation in its outlook on things in the life. I mean, it would have been a 400 to 500 member church. I think the neighborhood around it changed. I think a lot of times we had churches that probably were built on the edges of towns or cities, and then the city grew up around it. And our people who were living there and in that area moved out to bigger houses or nicer houses. And so maybe didn't stay in love with coming back in to go to church in some of those kinds of places. Part of the history of the Empire Church is they were told by a pastor probably 50 years ago that they probably wouldn't make it to the end of that decade, that just everything was stacked against them and they wouldn't live. And they tell that story with great pride because that pastor's long gone and probably deceased now, and they're still here worshiping and gathering, and they probably have about as many people as they had then. They don't add a lot of people, but they don't lose a lot of people.
The Tucson Church was established in 1956. At one time, the Tucson Church had 225 members. When I came to the church, our worship attendance was right around 30 to 35. During the time of decline, the Tucson Church of the Brethren lost 25 families. Well, that was before I got there, unfortunately, but they lost 25 families. And I could only speculate on reasons. I can only say that when churches go into a state of decline, it's a little bit like a train coming down the mountain. To stop it is nearly impossible. To restart it, to go back up the mountain, is impossible. In December of 2017, I loved it. I loved the people. It was a fantastic church, but for reasons that have become painfully obvious in the Church of the Brethren, the membership was departing fast because of people becoming deceased. There was our inability to bring young people into the church.
When we decided to list the property for sale and they found a church that was willing to buy it, it became much easier for them to say, okay, we're ready to let this go. And it's going to continue. And the closing celebration that we had there actually had representatives from the church that was buying it come to that celebration. They were able to offer a word of blessing to the church as for the ministry that they would be able to do. The money from that has been set aside for at least a period of 5 years for the possibility of trying to do something in the Tucson area again.
He had his greatest membership and attendance and so on when Bob Richards was the pastor. Bob was an Olympic pole vaulter. A lot of people came to hear him preach because he was an Olympic pole vaulter. The congregation then had a division, and about a half of the congregation withdrew and went to another congregation, another church. So when I got here, it was a remnant of what it had been.
Fellowship in Christ, Fremont Church of the Brethren. It was an interesting congregation in that there had been an Oakland, California Church of the Brethren that had gotten smaller and not many people lived in that vicinity any longer. And so sometime in the mid-1980s, there was a group of people from that group who were in the Fremont area who started a house church kind of meeting kind of thing. And eventually the district approved closing Oakland and moving the church from being the Oakland Church of the Brethren to being the Fellowship in Christ group. We rented from the YMCA and set up every week for worship there. There was Gail Hernandez, her name at the time last name was Howell. She and her husband had a home. Her first husband had a home in Fremont that had a large great room kind of area on it. And so that's where love feasts took place many times, or it was our fellowship hall, if you will, and board meeting location was at that household. We would do some exchange stuff with the San Francisco congregation, which still existed at that time. We would go in and do a Thanksgiving exchange. Their first pastor was Humataka Matsuoka, who eventually became the dean at Bethany Seminary. And then Jeff Newman Lee served them for several years. And then Aaron and I were their last Church of the Brethren settled pastors. We were there for 3 years. They ended up partnering with a United Church of Christ congregation in town, but they continued to be a Church of the Brethren congregation and stayed active in the district and the denomination. Those kinds of things, but never called another Brethren pastor. They just used the UCC pastor of the church that they were partnered with and taught the UCCs how to do love feast. In the Waterford church, the pastor called saying they wanted to retire and they didn't know what to do. And so I went and started meeting with their leadership. And the resources were very low. The district had put a lot of money into the last pastor trying to support to get something going. We talked about things we could try, and they would say, we've tried that, we did that, we've done all these things. And finally, kind of that core group of leadership just said, we're tired. And so we walked through the process of letting that church close. And we made an intentional decision to say, we're not going to try something right away. We're not ready to, but we're not going to take this $1 million building and just sell it because we want to get rid of it. We're going to hold on to it, and we're going to see if God might call us to do something in it. And they officially closed in January of 2016. It was the fall of 2019 that Florecita Molos and her husband and youngest daughter moved into the parsonage up there and began to do some work to think about planting a Spanish language congregation out of the Waterford building.
So I hope that you see from these clips that I've shown you that oral history has a way of finding out about things and recording things and keeping it for historical purposes of things that are no longer in existence. The Oakland Church of the Brethren, the Fremont Church of the Brethren, the San Francisco Church of the Brethren, the Tucson Church of the Brethren, the Fresno Church of the Brethren, and some of the reasons that they went by the side. And the fact, as Russ pointed out at the beginning, is that this is also true of the churches of the New Testament. And so the planting of the seeds, for instance, in Waterford, or the upcoming possibility in Tucson, and the money, it wasn't mentioned here, but the money from some of the churches that are being used for church plants elsewhere there. You've seen also in looking at these what the techniques of oral history are. In days before COVID, oral history was done face-to-face. And there's a lot to be said for face-to-face, but it turns out that there's also a lot to be said about recording online, because that allows for a rather even kind of recording, unless you have the kinds of gear that professionals have. It means that you're not going to have the kind of recording you might want it to have, but it works out fairly well on the recording. How oral historians work is they contact people, they explain how an oral history interview is going to work. One of the hardest things is scheduling an oral history interview. And in fact, I've, not for this project, but for other projects, have scheduled people in Europe and so forth, and finding the right time is always a challenge. But oral history, the best oral history when conducted, is really a conversation. And several of you here have participated in oral history with me on one time or another, and we've had wonderful conversations, because of course the interviewee has to trust the interviewer in order to provide reasonable kinds of answers. And I say reasonable kinds because memory is always a key. And when we try to think about any of us here talking about what happened last week, let alone what happened 40 years ago or 50 years ago, it's a real challenge, and it's becoming more and more a challenge as I get older and older, I'll tell you. And so we understand how that is. And then oral history interviews conclude with asking people for a deed of gift. And that's basically a statement that allows historians to use the material. Now, normally, what's supposed to happen is oral history should be fully transcribed and put in archives that way. But I'm a one-person shop, and so I haven't been able to do that. I've created what is called a finding aid, and I'm going to show you that in one of the next segments of my talk. But right now, I want, since I just showed you a number of churches that close, let me show you some churches that are doing things. And by the way, these are just selections. There are many, many other churches that have done wonderful things, and I could only, because of time and technical problems that I've been having, these are what came out of it. So let me show you the next segment here about new directions.
Then there was the mass exodus. And of course, where more and more African Americans were moving into the area, you had the exodus of more of the whites were moving out of the area. And so Brother Anthony was committed to stay. And next thing you know, with a lot of people leaving, I think the way he may share it, something like, here are the keys, we're gone. And so they had some that were still committed to serving and working and helping Imperial Heights. But from what I'm hearing, a lot of them did leave. And so Brother Anthony was committed to wanting to stay and help the church be a community church and grow. So more African Americans start coming to Imperial Heights Church as they were seeing that there were less and less whites there at the church. And so it grew from there. Imperial Heights is a hybrid church. With the African Americans coming in, they brought in the Baptist tradition from the African American church and merged it with the Church of the Brethren. And so if you come to Imperial Heights, you will see that we are still using the standard hymnal from the Baptist church. Oh, because that's where we're familiar. We're familiar with the songs. And you mentioned about the music, the connection of the music for us. Even though we transition into Church of the Brethren, we can't let go of that music. That music is those old songs that our parents and grandparents sang that brought us into the church in the first place. So we're hybrid. We're hybrid of that. And it works for us.
I was very intrigued to learn about this congregation who just a few months prior had come to a unanimous decision to sell this beloved church building that they had been in for almost 70 years, and to not close as a congregation, but to explore what new direction God might be calling them to when the blessings and the burdens of a giant church building were no longer in the picture. We have a direction that we're looking at. We have decided that we want to stay in Pomona. There were some questions about the other cities in the area. Would it be more appropriate to move to a different city that was nearby? But in the end, we did choose. We want to stay in Pomona, and we're going to look for a building to either rent or lease or possibly buy, where we can build intentional partnerships with two specific organizations, two nonprofits in the city that work on addressing things like food insecurity.
Oh no. Okay, Anna, stop it there because I don't know what I did, but somehow I stopped the sound. And I apologize for that. And because there were some other interesting new directions that churches were taking. And I'm hoping that whatever I did, I'm supposed to be doing the technical part here. And that was a technical mistake that hopefully will not continue on into the future. So the PSWD oral history collection that I have begun for us is hopefully only beginning. And although I have interviewed about 10 of you already, either for my University of Laverne Oral History Project or for the PSWD Oral History Project, many of you I haven't interviewed, and I'm hoping that you might be willing to be interviewed over the next year or so to talk about your experience in the PSWD. You can see that the kinds of things that people talk about are the kinds of things that are both interesting, but most importantly are important to them personally. We've seen that what can be important to them, particularly if it's a pastor or a particular leader, that these kinds of things are also will lead to other directions. The next segment, and boy, I hope I can get that sound back on. If anybody has any suggestions on what I might have done wrong, I've got fairly severe arthritis, and I sometimes hit the wrong things on the keypad without actually realizing that I've done it, and then can't figure out how to undo it. So hopefully that won't continue, because the next segment actually features two of the people in the room here tonight, talking about the stained glass in their churches. So keep your fingers crossed, and let's see if we can get this next segment in a way that that you can hear. Let's see, where is that one? Uh-oh, now I can't find it. So QuickTime Player, let's see. Oh, here it is. So let's see, I'm hoping it'll work.
Pastor Bob Morris, Glendora Church of the Brethren, describes the church's stained glass windows.
The Glendora Church of the Brethren is very fortunate to have beautiful stained glass windows. They're considered artwork. When we tried to have them repaired, the stained glass artist said, you know, these are really good examples of really truly stained glass, because they're not colored glass, it's actually stained glass. We have, you know, wonderful scenes of the life of Jesus. This is our main window, and it's not the complete window, because the bottom of the window says, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Church was built, and it became a congregation officially in 1902. Now we have a tower without a bell. We got the Nobel Prize, but it has some stained glass windows in the tower.
Like the Glendora Church, the Church of the Living Savior in McFarland also has stained glass windows. Here, Senior Pastor Phil Core describes them.
We have beautiful stained glass windows that we are told are museum quality, that tell the life of Jesus from his birth to his ascension. And then in the round stained glass window up above, but visible above, well, what would be the front of the chapel or sanctuary, is the Good Shepherd with various sheep around him. He's holding one, and the sanctuary itself is beautiful. I'm guessing it's Brethren or Germanic in design, and has sweeping sort of almost like an inverted boat, but wooden beams up above. And that carries through to the fellowship hall, which could be like a medieval hall, except it doesn't have the areas for a fire in the middle.
For the Imperial Heights Church, music is the key, like it is in many other churches. Pastor Thomas Dowdy actually taught himself how to play the saxophone so that he could contribute.
For the African American church, music is essential. It's very essential. Well, because again, and I'm sure you know, the heartbeat of the church was and is the music. And so for the African American church, it is a big draw. The preachers and the preaching, it's like, okay, good. Once you get my attention, I'm willing to listen to you.
Well, I'm ever so glad that we got the sound back. So whatever I did, it was undone. And another thing that this shows you so clearly in the clips that I just show you is that it makes a permanent record of the people in the way they talk, the way they behave. I mean, I don't mean to pick on our friend Bob Morris, who maybe he's not here anymore, but in any case he was. Oh, there you are, Bob. He not only showed his wonderful stained glass windows, which we can see in his picture right now, but he showed his sense of humor. And I saw Jim chuckle when Bob said our Nobel Prize, but that's Bob. Anybody who has worked at all with Bob or been in meetings with Bob, you know that he has this wonderful sense of humor that strikes people funny sometimes, and maybe all the time, but he's a delight, and it comes across as all the others do as well. Well, who are all the others? Let me share my screen again to show you what we call a finding aid. Since I'm not able to, and this is probably pretty small. Let's see if I can make it any larger. There we go. Since I'm not able in terms of time to transcribe everything, and I don't have the money to have other people transcribe it, it means that oral history interviews such as these would simply sit in a computer until somebody came along and said, well, I'd like to see that. By the way, here's the interview I did with Andra Anthony. What's interesting, and I'm going to mention that because I think Jim knows Andra Anthony, is that I was told that his name was Anthony. And in fact, that's Russ told me that. And when I talked with him, it was clear that wasn't his, and he doesn't really go with Tony either. But Andra Ardra rather was a family name or something that came right at when he was born, and so it's just kind of an interesting thing. But that is now also collected, and so what you see is in the finding aid. If we go across, there are also key terms, so that a researcher who was looking at Robert Aguirre's interview would know that Robert talked about Glendale. He talked about Reedley, the Cornerstone Church. He talked about what COVID-19 did to his churches. He talked about the district itself. He talked about Vivac Vocational. In fact, you heard about that as well, because that part was quoted. And so a researcher can go through the various key terms and at least have some sense of what is in each of the interviews. The third column here talks about who the people are. And I will say that some of the people who I interviewed, as you can see, some of their names here are people that are no longer with us. And so we have in our archives information from all these people talking about the district, talking about the Church of the Brethren, talking about themselves and their lives and so forth, and can be used by researchers, can be used for that matter by any of you as part of the archival material that is available on and about the Church of the Brethren and the churches in the district and the district itself. That's why I'm hoping that some of you and others that you may know that are on the list right now might be willing at a future time to also talk about the district. The district has changed dramatically, as you all know, in the last 40 or 50 or 70 or 80 years. And to get what we can down for history. And you say, well, I'm not interested in history. Well, that's fine, but maybe your children will be, or maybe others that you know. Let me show you a clip since we're not running out of time, but you're probably tired of hearing me talk about this. So let me show a quip on some of the programs that are out there in the churches. So here's this one.
The congregation started to be already mostly Hispanic, but bilingual Hispanic. They spoke English and Spanish. And in the mix of those, drug addicts were coming in. And that's when Bittersweet Ministries began, which was a rehabilitation center. I started a rehabilitation center at the parsonage, and I had a space in the back of the church, and I opened it up, and all of a sudden, I had eventually had 35 men and about over 20 women in my home. But my job was to work with two strikers, and these men were either finished the program or they would go to prison for the rest of their life, for 25 to life. And the women, I mostly helped them get their children back, trying to restore them back.
So some families in the congregation thought, we ought to come up with something to provide some kind of childcare for the families. And so they started working on what can we provide? Now they were hoping to use their, the initial building, the first building, to provide that, but it wasn't up to code and things like that. So they underwent a campaign to build a brand new building that would be up to code and could, house at the time what was just originally intended to be a daycare. And so I think it was 1977 that that daycare opened, and I believe it was just at first it was only 10 kids and just a couple staff and 10 kids. But over time, it has grown and grown and grown. Now it's a full-on child development center serving preschool children. It has an after-school program, and we can serve up to about 100 kids in the child development center. Where the church is at right now was built for the purposes of being a multi-purpose, multifunctional building to allow for, the child care then and now the child development center to be able to utilize a majority of the building Monday through Friday, morning to evening. And on the weekends or in the evenings, the building could be turned into, a church building. And so, in our, what we, use as our sanctuary, all the walls are movable so we can move child development center furniture out, church furniture in.
The things I've seen, we put 196 solar panels on our roof. We've responded to climate change. We've created the Peace and Carrots Community Garden, which is truly a community garden. We're using it to also provide produce for the kitchen, to feed the homeless. I think our ministry to the homeless has greatly increased. Our connection to the University of Laverne has gotten much better, stronger.
Okay, blessing to blessing, it's a ministry inside the church.
Clara, yeah.
But the fifth homeless is Café con Pasión.
Coffee with Passion, a community outreach life that we live at church.
And we name it like that because we start bring coffee to Home Depot, to those workers that are there like looking for a job. So we bring coffee and bread. And this is why we start calling this ministry Café con Pasión, coffee with passion. Then we see the need of the homeless. So we keep the name, but now we are going to the shelter in Santa Ana, who has like a 450 people living there.
Homeless.
Go once a month and give dinner to them. Like we prepare like 175. Every year we start with fasting and prayer time. We use like doing like 14 days or 21 days. And for one another reason, we didn't start in January 2020. So we was ready to start in March when the church was closed. And like, what are we gonna do? So we have the idea to start a Faith Lifetime, 7:30 at nighttime. So we're not stopping since March 16. We're every night at 7:30. We call them Nights with God. So every night at 7:30 we get connected, and we're being
we're getting close to almost 300 consecutive
days,
nights. Now we are reaching out to maybe 400 plus each night. Sometimes I'm amazed of how many people are joining.
People that we don't know.
My wife's family, cousins, uncles,
friends
from the school, high school friends, university friends, and also my friends, my family from Ecuador and Spain, Italy, who are living there, and also family of our brothers and sisters from church. They all connect every single night to be part of this Principe de Paz prayer night.
Here with engaging the community with our block parties and our Standing Together in Peace, which was an interfaith peace event that happened each year on September 21st. Those centered us in the community and kept us connected. We did appreciations for first responders during fires of 2009, I think it was. So we've really provided, we've really become a community center. We have a potluck that the community comes together around once a month prior to the pandemic, the building of the Friends Center, which is a collaborative effort. It was the first straw bale building permitted in San Diego. And it is a collaborative between 4 different organizations. The organizations are the American Friends Service Committee, their border program, the Religious Society of Friends, which is San Diego meeting. Then it's the San Diego Peace Resource Center, which is a social justice organization that looks at education, networking, advocacy, and then the Church of the Brethren.
Well, that gives you more insight into individual people, into their churches and so forth. And I forgot to mention at the beginning of the presentation tonight that I have not been to a number of these churches, and I searched out church buildings. So I hope I got the right ones, but no one sounded as though they were shocked when I put something up and said it was there. What's interesting to me, I did try to find pictures, for instance, of the San Francisco Church of the Brethren that once existed. And if you Google San Francisco Church of the Brethren, it turns out that there's a number of Brethren churches, at least that are listed in San Francisco today. And so to find that historic building is hard. Fortunately, I guess Fresno only had one Church of the Brethren. And so I was able to get that church building, assuming that was the correct one. Some of you might know, and don't guffaw if that were the case. Now, I realize we only have a few minutes, that is until 7:45, but I would very much like to show you this last one, which I call unity and love, because it talks about our unity statement, our unity commitment, and this is it.
You know, every district's got its own unique story. And I think PSWD has a part of that story to tell and some of its own uniqueness. I think our Westernness, with still these roots that many of us came here from places other than here, and church plays a vital role in community and connection and informing who we are. And yet there's this notion of openness to experimenting and trying things that you don't always see in other places. Despite what the denomination may think about us, which may be that they think everybody out here is ridiculously progressive or liberal, the reality is we have the same diversity, the fullness of diversity here as any district in the church does. And yet one of our pluses is because we're not right on top of each other as much, maybe it gives us a little bit more space, one, to operate, and two, to not feel like we were in each other's stuff.
Growing out of all of this contentiousness over different points of view. And so the idea for developing a statement that said, you know, this is who we are as the Pacific Southwest District. We have as much theological difference within the PSWD, I think, as any district. So I thought it was important for us to talk about and come together. And that's what became the unity statement, or kind of a covenant of understanding.
The unity statement is huge, in my opinion. And that was, you know, Brian just dreamed of that. He went to the code meetings, Council of District Executives. So he went to those meetings where other district executives were talking about punitive statements they were making, or how their districts were just blowing apart over sexual orientation questions. And he just felt like what we needed to do was focus on what we could do together instead of dividing ourselves up. So I remember him saying that when they agreed that a unity statement was something we ought to talk about, and he gathered together more conservative and more liberal people within the district,
I assembled a group of people that were, I thought, the most progressive and the most conservative in the old boardroom here at Hillcrest. And we met and we talked for a day. We continued to work on it and talk about scripture and talk about foundation. When we first began, Brian Boyer came into the room. He was district executive, and he said, I think that you will either come up with a statement by the end of the day, or there will be blood on the wall. And then he left. And we had a statement by the end of the day. When it came to making a decision about adopting this statement, this covenant, this...
Remember the district conference where that was voted on. It was held at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, and we were each asked to make a banner that would tie into a big center round piece up high on the ceiling, and then these streamers of these banners with these words would go out that would speak of the missions of each of our churches in a variety of colors. Mary Kay Ogden was the moderator, and right before we took a vote on that unity statement, there was like an insight session kind of time to talk about it. And I remember a denominational leader was there to represent the denomination. And he told us it was unwise to pass such a unity statement.
John Price was moderator-elect. And John probably represents one of the most conservative theological situations. And so I'm in the front running the meeting, and John stood up kind of midway down the aisle at the Laverne Church. And I think his presence and people seeing him, and he spoke and said he was in favor of this particular statement. And I think that had a lot of influence on people. If John Price is supporting it and Mary Kay Ogden is promoting it.
But there was just good conversation. And when it came for a vote, it was unanimous. You know, it makes sense that a unity statement should be passed unanimously.
When it was all done and it was unanimous, at that point in time, Brian said to me, I didn't think it would pass.
I don't think it's a unity statement. I think it's a unity commitment. When we have hit hard times in our district, people have said, remember, we have a unity statement. When people have come and wanted to pass something that would say everybody has to think this way, or these are the rules, what we're going to do to you to discipline you if you don't, we always come back with, but wait, we have a unity statement. I think our district is just a real model of turning our attention to the future instead of trying to hold on to something that no longer exists. And I think a huge part of that is our encouragement of and curiosity about learning to know new people and new things, and a commitment to constantly being in conversation with each other, even when it's hard. I can't imagine wanting to be anywhere else because of I love where I pastor, and I love the district in which I do it. I think in the Church of the Brethren, this is kind of this assumption that, you know, Mecca is back east in Pennsylvania, but Nirvana is out here.
I have been so grateful to be part of this district for a number of reasons. The diversity, and I mean that in a lot of different ways. I mean the ethnic diversity, the racial diversity, the language diversity, the diversity theologically, not despite of, but maybe because of that diversity, our district has found a way to have a really a strong sense of identity and love for one another, even amidst all the ways that make us different and that could in some places really divide us. But in this district, I have not felt that. I have felt that the unity and the Christian love in this district more than I have in other places.
Well, so that ends our video clips. As you can see, why I wanted to end with that positive note. There's been a lot of change in the PSWD, and these oral histories help to document it. It's only a start, but it's a partial start. It documented many churches that close, many churches that are struggling, some brand new churches that are alive and dynamic, some older churches that are changing and are dynamic as well. And then just a lot of general stuff that is out there as well. But I thought it was exciting personally to end with that unity statement, because I know even in this room right here, we have a number of theological positions. We have a number of political and social differences, maybe not disagreements, but that unity statement, or as Susan summarized, that unity commitment seems so strong here that even though I'm a flaming liberal myself, I can talk to and have a good conversation and a successful coffee, perhaps with people in this room and elsewhere in the district that are much more conservative than that. Now, we do know that we have at least one church, perhaps a couple, that are basically not participating, won't talk to the DE and so forth, because we're too liberal for them, if you will. But nevertheless, that unity statement, that unity commitment carries through. So we have 10 more minutes. If anybody would like to complain, criticize, suggest, recommend, comment, the floor is yours. Just unmute yourself.
So yeah, is your project ongoing? Like, will you continue to collect interviews?
Yeah, Judy, I hope so. There actually are several people in the room right here who I've asked to interview at one time or another. Okay, thank you for Katie.
Don't give up on me. I'm maybe after district conference is over, we can finally get set aside the time to do the interview.
Well, thank you, Katie. Well, there's your answer, Judy, that oral history, I think, should be ongoing no matter what. The reason I think it should be ongoing, because there's always new ideas and new experiences. Thank you for asking that question. And Katie, thank you for Katie and I were on the same, actually the program committee that is putting on district conference. And the last couple of times I asked her, she said something to the effect that it takes me a while to decide, but we'll do it someday. So thank you, Katie.
Sorry, may I?
Please.
As a very conservative pastor who learned to navigate his way through the United Church of Christ, in some respects, very little has changed by being in the Pacific Southwest. But, you did have a successful interview with me. The first time I visited with Russ, I made very clear my disagreements with him, but we have moved forward. I am curious to know the names and locations of those two churches, because I wasn't aware of churches that weren't talking to district people. Did you know what those churches are?
Yeah, they. I've got it here. I just have to. It's up in. I think it's Layton, is where it is.
Laton, Layton.
There's no Y. Laton. Yeah, and you can talk to Joe Vecchio about it, because Joe was, I think, the pastor there for a while, many years ago.
And was there a second one?
You
can email me. That I don't want to take up people's time now.
I think it's called Cornerstone in Reedley. Actually, it's the Reedley one that Joe was the pastor of. But if you look in the PSWD directly, there's not even a contact for Reedley. And it was funny when I did make the faux pas of trying to reach out to Layton to get to see if they would participate, and I was told later on that was not a good idea. So,
okay, well, thank you, because as much as it might hurt, as of now, they're still listed as being part of the district.
Yes. Well, and I think the truth is, as you've well pointed out, Phil, that you and I are very different, probably socially and theologically. Well, I'm not a theologian; I'm a historian and that kind of stuff. But we've gotten along pretty well, and I thank you for that. In accepting me as okay, even though I'm a crazy liberal, I suppose.
And back at you. Mm-hmm.
So
you've accepted me.
Al, one thing I would just say is, and this is something I'm going to be able to contribute when the time comes and we have the interview, I was on the district board at the time they developed the unity statement was developed.
Ah,
And I have some strong feelings about that time being one, that the whole unity statement was very much a God crafted thing. With the assistance of the moderator and also at that time, our Jan Thompson, who was, I think, the chair of the board, if I'm not mistaken. I'll be glad to talk to you about that when the time comes.
thank you. Thank you.
And here's a little more history. I don't know if I told it to you or not, Al, because I went off on my passion, which I'll be talking about tomorrow night, thanks to you. Back in 1991, the congregation here, from what I've been told, was very concerned that the name of Jesus was not even being, thank you, a shameless plug, my Titus Cone biography. But they were concerned that the name of Jesus was not being mentioned at all and it was going new age. So rather than leave, they added a name. You'll still find them listed if you Google Church of the Brethren. They're the first one listed in California, but they changed the name to Church of the Living Savior, and I won't fight the other sounds.
Yeah, I think I got everybody muted again.
Okay, so that was an expression of how far left this church felt the district had gone. It would be 30 years ago. And there has been enough progress and grace from the district that since I've been here, and I guess before, people from this congregation have been invited to serve in significant leadership positions.
Yes, Karen Pearson was the moderator a couple of years ago, and she sat on the programs committee. What strikes me personally, and maybe it's because I'm an outsider, I wasn't born brethren, and came much later to it, like you, yes, is that everybody seemed to accept me, and even in meetings where the different people clearly would disagree if they talked about the things that, sex, religion, and politics, right? That we would be in trouble. But I don't know, because of the unity statement, which I didn't hear about until last year, even though I've been going to the Laverne Church for about 30 years, that feeling and that people talked about in that last segment seems to pervade. Go ahead, please. Linda.
We moved out here into Arizona in 1998, and the church we came from was, it was conservative. It was in Ohio. They're even more conservative now than they were when we were there, and we felt when we moved out here, we attended Circle of Peace. It was Glendale Church of the Brethren at that time, that it felt like home. It felt comfortable. It felt like we were welcomed. And I have noticed when we visit back east that we feel more constricted back there. It's like you're trying to fit yourself into a smaller box of what you're grown into. And I've always felt that I've liked the diversity of the Church of the Brethren, because you have so many different voices that appeal to so many different people. I mean, if all of us felt the same way and all of us did the same thing, it would be really boring. And God didn't create us the same. He created us all differently. And while I may not agree with a lot of people on conservative viewpoints or on liberal viewpoints, I respect the opinions of each other. And I think as long as we can respect their people's opinions and agree to disagree on certain things that we don't agree on or can't agree, but still love them as people, I think our district is blessed.
And something Linda said, I very much appreciate when she mentioned a very conservative church or whatever. I was looking at faces, and while they might have been thinking it on the inside, I didn't see any snickering.
No.
I mean, in the United Church of Christ, my ordination was initially denied because of my view of the Bible and of the person of Jesus Christ. And that was a day when black was white and white was black. God ultimately worked it out, but that did not happen here. When I went for the dual standing interview, we had a lively discussion, but as far as I could tell, there was never any question. The church here had called me to be its pastor. They wanted to get to know me, and they confirmed it with the granting of dual standing. So I appreciate that, Linda.
It boggles my mind at how strict black and white a lot of people have become, and I see shades of gray all over the place. I mean, it's so much more welcoming if you can be accepted as you are, without having to try to constrict your viewpoints into the ones that it's accepted at the particular place where you are. And I really feel home in Church of the Brethren because of the way we respect each other, especially in this district.
Well, thank you go ahead, Connie.
Oh, well, I'm going to kind of change the subject. So if people have something to follow what the topic was on previously.
I think you're okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm curious about the location of your oral history gathering. Do you hold it personally, or is it in the archives at the University of Laverne?
Well, I'm happy to say that all of the Church of the Brethren Pacific Southwest district archives are at the University of Laverne, including these recordings that I have made. And I'm also happy to say that we have a very professional and competent archivist who is taking care of our Pacific Southwest district and all the churches and the former churches stuff very carefully. Thank you for asking that question. Okay, well, people are leaving because we've gone past time, but I do want to thank you so much for coming. And if there's anyone who wants to tarry and ask additional questions, please do. Others, just go ahead and take your leave. I will be, Joe Vecchio tells me all of the Insight sessions will be up on the website in a week or two so that you can see the other ones that you missed or re-see things that you've already seen. And there will be a questionnaire, an evaluation form going out in a half an hour or so from Joe. So thank you so much. Bye-bye. Appreciate you. Bye. Yes, bye.
Do you have the archives from the various churches within your archive at Laverne?
I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning of the question.
Okay, our church was established in 1892, I think, Glendale Church of the Brethren, and we have a lot of archival material. I've currently got it in my computer room, and it's like stacked and stacked and stacked, about 10 boxes of it. And I just wondered.
Yes, if you would like to and be willing to put it in the archives of the Pacific Southwest District at the University of Laverne, you certainly can. And do you have a pencil there? I'll give you the email address of the archivist.
Okay.
It's B as in Benjamin, J as in Joseph, E as in Edward, N as in Nathan, K as in King, I as in Indian, N as in Nathan, S. Ben B. Jenkins at laverne.edu. And I know Russ has transported on a couple of occasions boxes of stuff from various churches. And I know Russ visits every church from,
Yeah.
yeah. So he probably could take it back and give it directly to Ben.
My daughter, as part of her museum studies degree from ASU, her senior project was to start she created an archive within the Circle of Peace Church. And we've got a lot of stuff. And I just wondered, should we ship it to you or should we keep it?
Well,
advice with it.
Yeah.
So I would conversation with your archivist.
Yeah, go ahead and have a conversation with him because I think he would be delighted to put it into the archives with the other. I mean, Russ delivered to him something like 40 boxes when they moved from Pomona to Glendora. So it will take a little bit of time. It'll take.
Oh yeah, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
It take time to get the stuff I've got organized yet too. And I'm looking at some of it. I've got district paperwork from the 50s and the 60s. So
Wow.
I know that should be shipped back to you guys.
Good. Well, thank you so much for preserving those things, Linda, and putting them into the archives. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Al, I'm from San Diego and been there, 58 years now. And we are probably just about the senior members of the Church of the Brethren. We've seen a lot of changes there. I'd be willing to talk with you and contribute a little bit to your archives if you'd like for me to. And we've seen a lot of changes in the San Diego Church over the years that we've been here. And so I think that we have some interesting history that we could contribute.
I would very much like, you probably don't remember, but we've talked once before about the University of Laverne. I would very much like to talk with you. In fact, when Russ went down to San Diego, perhaps the last time, I asked him to inquire about the Kitty Hawk 7, and he said that you were the expert on that history.
Well, I was quite involved in it, and back in '72, I think it was, and I remember and have some literature on it, but I think I passed that on to Sarah, our pastor, Sarah Haldeman Scar, at one point, and I'm not sure just where it is right now, but there's some interesting history to that, and other things about our dealing with refugees, of course, and with sanctuary and all those kind of things.
Well, I'd very much like to. I'm in a very busy point right now at the university, but in the next couple of weeks, I'll get back to you and see if we can't arrange a time. And of course, district conference is coming up this weekend. And, and the thing is, I thought because the gavel is going to be passed on Saturday night at Principe de Paz, or maybe at the business meeting, I don't know. So I thought, okay, Sunday, even though I have to teach on Sunday afternoon, I thought I can rest, right? But then Susan Boyer, our senior pastor, has to have her knee redone, and she's going to have that done on Friday. So she said, Al, would you give the message on Sunday? So somehow in preparing for that's my next worry.
Oh wow.
We'll pray for you.
Yeah. And for Susan, she's we've known Susan since she was youth in our youth group in San Diego, so we're quite familiar with her too. So,
Al, I don't
Hi.
want to overload your brain too much, but Todd Lawrence is trying to get me to teach. This is a different subject. Trying to get me to teach environmental history of California in the spring.
Oh,
And I have some other commitments to prevent me from doing it full time, but wondered if you might have some interest in co-teaching again. So
Sure.
think about that and we'll explore it.
yeah, I'd love to get a chance to teach with you again, Harv.
Okay.
So put me down as a yes. Tell Todd that I'll join. Okay.
Okay. We'll
Okay.
talk some more.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Nice to
good
see
to see
you
you.
guys.
Good
Yeah.
to see you, Harv and Connie.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
David, are you still there?